The cold had a way of seeping into your bones, even through wool, leather, and duty. Sergeant Thomas Brenner had stood motionless for 43 minutes and 17 seconds. Though he'd stopped counting long ago, his right foot was beginning to sting. Not the pins and needles of early discomfort, but the slow burn of weight grinding into bone. The bearskin hat pressed heavily on his forehead, shielding his eyes from the wind, but trapping the sweat from the unseasonably warm April sun. He didn't blink, didn't twitch. Didn't look at the girl with the bright phone case shouting, "Do the face again," like that meme, nor at the drunk lad in a football shirt, mimicking his march, legs kicking out like a parody. Tom stood, he always stood. It was what they paid him to do, what generations of guardsmen had done before him. But this was not what it used to be. Once standing post at Buckingham Palace meant solemn respect, pride. Now, more often than not, it meant becoming part of a stranger's Instagram story, a backdrop, a prop, worse, comedy. Something to provoke and mock just to film a reaction he wasn't allowed to give. Tom wasn't old, not really 38, but the eyes behind his still gaze had seen things most tourists couldn't imagine. Afghanistan, patrols that ended in fire, friends who never came home, and now this. People asked what he did for a living. He never said, "I stand still." He said, "I serve in the King's Guard," because that's what it still meant to him. Service, discipline, representation, not theatre. The bell above the archway rang. 1:30. A fresh shift would come soon. He resisted the urge to glance toward the gate. Movement was weakness, and weakness was not in the protocol. A little boy tugged at the hem of his mother's coat, whispering, "Mum, is he real?" Tom heard it. He always heard it. His lips didn't move, but inside something softened. "Yes," the woman replied. "He's real and brave. That almost made it worth it. Almost. But the new shift was late. It happened sometimes. Delays, miscommunications. Nothing dramatic. Still, Tom's knees had started to pulse in that dull, rhythmic throb. He knew too well. He'd been on post almost an hour longer than scheduled, but time didn't belong to him when he wore the red coat. The new shift was late. It happened sometimes. Delays, miscommunications. Nothing dramatic. Still, Tom's knees had started to pulse in that dull, rhythmic throb. He knew too well. He'd been on post almost an hour longer than scheduled, but time didn't belong to him when he wore the red coat. He stood outside the palace gates, still as the statues behind him, while another crowd filtered in. Weekend traffic. Tourists from cruise ships. Londoners killing time before dinner. The square buzzed with voices, phone cameras and half-hearted attempts at reverence. Then came the laughter, loud, forced, deliberate. 3 teenagers approached, boys maybe 16 or 17. One had a vape tucked behind his ear. Another wore headphones slung around his neck, music leaking like static. The third had his phone raised already, recording. "Oh, hey, soldier boy," the tallest shouted, "bet you blink if I say something nasty about your mum." The others howled. Tom didn't move. "Come on then," the second chimed in, "say summerthin'. Don't they teach you how to fight back in guard school?" He didn't flinch. Bet I could nick his hat. And he wouldn't budge. The first one smirked, now inches away. Like them wind up toys, the boy spat. A wet slap of saliva landed just shy of Tom's polished boot. People saw, some laughed. Others turned away, unsure whether to intervene or just keep walking. One woman scolded the boys weakly, "Leave him alone, he's doing his job," but her voice was lost in the clatter of selfies and TikTok banter. Tom's jaw clenched beneath the still mask of his face. His fingers twitched imperceptibly against the butt of his rifle. Not enough for anyone to see, but he felt it, that old instinct, that edge of training meant for war, not ridicule. He remembered the parade ground at Pierbright, the drill sergeant barking, "You are the wall between the public and the crown. You are not man. You are not mood. You are duty." So he stood, he endured. Eventually, the teens got bored and wandered off, laughing, pushing each other. The crowd thinned. No apology, no consequence, just digital trophies in the form of video clips and trending hashtags. Tom's relief arrived moments later. The changeover was brisk, mechanical. No one mentioned the incident. In the locker room, he peeled off his jacket with slow, aching movements. No one asked how he was. They all had their own stories, their own moments of restraint mistaken for weakness. That night, Tom walked home through the quiet streets of Lambeth, past kids on scooters, past shuttered shops, past a homeless man curled beneath The flat was quiet, as it always was. Tom hung his uniform in the hallway, meticulously, like ritual. The red tunic on a padded hanger, the bearskin on a custom hook, his boots he lined parallel to the wall, still gleaming from the morning polish. He moved slower in civilian clothes. Not because the garments restricted him, but because they didn't. The uniform demanded posture, precision. At home, he allowed himself a slight stoop, the limp in his left leg becoming more noticeable. His body remembered the shrapnel, even if most people had long forgotten the war. The kettle whistled. He poured tea into the same chipped mug he'd used for 6 years. Ever since Claire left, they hadn't divorced out of hatred. It was the silence. The long stretches where she didn't know where he was, and the longer stretches when he returned and couldn't talk about it. Some marriages don't end in argument. Some just fade like a flag left too long in the rain. There were photos still, boxed up mostly, but one remained on the shelf above the TV, a group of soldiers in the desert, squinting into a brutal sun. Tom stood near the center, arms slung over a grinning lance corporal named Lewis. The next month, Lewis would be killed in Helmand by an Ide. Tom would carry part of the blast in his leg, and all of it in his memory. He'd been decorated, commended. There were medals in a drawer that hadn't been opened in 2 years. And now people laughed at him because he didn't move. He stared at the photo. He hadn't spoken to anyone in it in years. Some were gone. Others had drifted back into civilian life, changed like him. But he hadn't left service. Not really. His battlefield now was a ceremonial post. But the discipline, the code, it remained. The uniform gave structure, meaning even when the world around it seemed to forget. His phone buzzed, a message from his sister. Saw a video today. Were you the one they were messing with? Looked like you. No emoji, no question mark, just a flat observation. He didn't reply. Instead, he stood at the window, mug in hand, looking down at the quiet street. A group of teenagers skated past, shouting, laughing, music blaring from a speaker. Tom didn't resent them, not really, but he wondered what would they have done if they'd stood where he once had, in the sand, with lives on the line. Would they mock then, or freeze? He sipped his tea. His leg ached. Tomorrow, he'd polish the buttons again. Smooth the collar, fix the line of his belt, because it mattered, even if no one said thank you. The morning was grey, London grey, that specific shade of sky that wasn't rain yet, but promised nothing else. Tom arrived at the palace early, as he always did. He stood quietly in the mess hall, nursing a black coffee, while others chatted over sausage rolls and weather complaints. He didn't speak unless spoken to. Not because he was rude, but because small talk felt like a foreign language these days. His commanding officer gave the usual brief, new protocols, a change in foot rotation, increased footfall expected due to a visiting delegation. Tom nodded once, said nothing. Then he changed into the uniform, jacket crisp, brass shining, boots tight. He tucked painkillers into his sock. No one saw. By 10 a.m, he was in position at the palace gates. Tourists were already gathering. It didn't take long before the mockery started again. "Bet he's a robot," one woman said loudly, angling, her phone up to his face. Her friend cackled. "Let's test it." "Boo." A man in his 20s leaned in close, too close, and pulled a silly face. "Come on, smile, mate. You're at work, not a funeral." Tom didn't move. He never did. But then came the shove. It wasn't hard, a challenged nudge, like a teenager trying to provoke a bouncer. But it was enough to throw him slightly off balance. His boot slipped half an inch on the damp stone beneath. He caught himself adjusted without betraying it with expression. Gasps, laughter. Phones up, capturing it all. The man walked away smug, a joke shared with his mates. Tom heard one of them say, "Did you see that? Nearly knocked him down. Bet we're on the news by tea." Tom's heart hammered, not from fear but fury, white, hot, controlled. Buried deep, the way only a soldier knows how, he didn't move, but something inside him cracked, not loudly, just enough to make the silence feel heavier than usual. Later, in the locker room, he sat on the bench, staring at the floor. Upper Al Mathers, a younger guard with only 3 years in, glanced at him. "You good, mate?" Tom looked up slowly. For a moment he considered answering honestly, saying, "No, actually. I'm not. I've been standing for 15 years in places most people couldn't last 15 minutes. And now they treat us like we're ornaments with rifles." But he didn't. Instead, he just nodded. "Yeah, just tired." Mathers hesitated. "If you ever want to talk or, let me know." Tom offered a polite smile. The kind you give when you appreciate something, even if you'll never act on it. That night, he didn't go straight home. He walked instead through Whitehall, past the cenotaph, past the tourists, the taxis, the world turning as it always had. He ended up on a bench near to James's Park. His legs were screaming, his back was tight, but it was the weariness behind his ribs, the kind no rest could fix, that sat heaviest. He looked at the palace in the distance, all lit up, beautiful, grand. He wasn't angry at the people, not really. Just tired of being invisible until someone wanted a photo or a laugh. Tomorrow, he'd stand again, but the crack inside him, it was growing. It started with a video. Someone posted it to TikTok that night, a shaky vertical clip, no longer than 30 seconds. It showed a man in a red uniform being shoved by a tourist, caught off guard for half a second before regaining composure. The caption read, "Even the Queen's guards can't take a joke, pound London, pound palace prank." By morning, it had 2 million views. Comments flooded in, some mocking, others angry. Most ignorant, lol, he flinched. Why do they even stand there? Statues with guns. Imagine getting paid to do nothing all day. Serves him right. It's just a bit of fun. Tom found out about the video not from his regiment, not from the ministry, but from his neighbor's teenage son. "Hey, Mr. B, you're viral." Tom had no idea what he meant until he checked his phone and saw his own still face, mid-shove, paused like a deer in headlights. By midday, tabloids had picked it up. "Unflappable guard nearly falls to tourist prank." Read one headline above a photo cropped for maximum embarrassment. The article was light on facts, heavy on ridicule, just another disposable bit of internet fodder, clicks and comments, no names. No dignity, but someone noticed. A woman named Hannah Vale. She wasn't famous. Just a widow. Her husband had served with Tom in Helland. Lance Corporal David Bile, killed 2010, buried with full honors. Tom had carried his coffin. Hannah wrote a short, sharp opinion piece and sent it to her local paper. They published it. "The man in that uniform isn't a clown. He's a soldier, a veteran, a human being. My husband stood beside him in the desert. I watched him hold the hand of a dying friend so someone's son wouldn't die alone. You laugh at him now because he doesn't move. When you poke him, that silence you mock is discipline. That stillness is sacrifice. If you knew half of what he's seen, you wouldn't dare call it funny." It was reprinted, shared, quoted. Soon the narrative began to shift. Talk radio stations picked it up. Callers, especially older veterans, phoned in furious. "They don't understand what standing guard means," said one. "They think it's theater, it's ceremony, yes, but it's also presence, it's memory, it's protection." Even a retired major general tweeted the column, adding, "Respect is a quiet thing. It does not shout. It stands." That afternoon, Tom was called into his officer's office. The major didn't scold him, didn't ask him to stay silent. Instead, he asked a question, "Would you be willing to speak?" Tom blinked. To who? To the public, to say something real. Tom hesitated. He wasn't a speaker, he was a soldier, a man trained to act without asking. But the crack inside him had widened, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to let something out. That night, sitting at his kitchen table, he wrote something. Not long, not dramatic, but honest. The video was only 3 minutes long. No dramatic music, no fancy lighting, just Tom, sitting on a bench in his red tunic, off duty but still in uniform, a quiet corner of Green Park behind him, wind in the trees, London rumbling just out of frame. He looked straight into the camera, calm. Steady, the same stillness he'd worn for years, now channeled into his voice. My name is Sergeant Thomas Brenner. I've served in the British Army for 18 years. I've stood outside royal palaces, and I've stood in places a lot less forgiving. Pause. You may have seen a video of me last week being shoved by a tourist. It wasn't the first time. It won't be the last. I didn't react because I wasn't trained to, because we're taught discipline unshakable, even under pressure. Some people think that makes us emotionless or robotic, but not a robot. He looked down briefly, gathering himself, not for effect but for honesty. I've lost mates in combat. I've carried coffins. I've been blown off my feet in Afghanistan and stood back up again. And now I stand here still, every day, rain or shine. Because the uniform I wear means something. A long pause. I don't want praise. I don't need thanks. But I'd just ask that people remember the man under the bearskin hat is still a man with a story, with scars, with a duty that doesn't end when the camera turns off. No slogans, no dramatics, just silence as the video faded out. It was posted on the official British Army account the next morning, and it went viral for the right reasons this time. Comments flooded in. Didn't realize what they go through. That hit me. Respect to every one of them. And believe we treat them like that. My granddad served in the Guard. He never spoke about it. Now I understand why this man is class. Absolute class. Veterans groups shared it, so did school teachers, even me. PS across the political divide, publicly condemned the mockery he'd endured. Within a week, Parliament discussed implementing better security around ceremonial posts. Signs were added near major guard stations. These soldiers are not actors. They are serving members of the armed forces. Please treat them with respect. The tourist who had shoved Tom, banned from UK public monuments for 2 years. More importantly, public attitudes began to change, slowly but noticeably. The next time Tom stood post, there were no jeers, no dares, no shoves, just quiet and the occasional nod from passers-by, small acknowledgements that said, "We see you now." A girl, maybe 9 or 10, stepped up beside her father and asked in a whisper, "Daddy, is he the one from the video?" Tom didn't look down. He didn't move, but her father replied, "Yes, love, he is. That's the man who stands still, so others don't have to." Spring arrived gently that year. The daffodils pushed through the earth around Buckingham Palace, and the tourists returned, as they always did, phones in hand, faces upturned. But something had changed. They stood a little further back now, spoke a little softer. And when their children reached out to wave at the guards, parents placed gentle hands on their shoulders and said, "No, darling, let them be. That's a real soldier." Tom Brenner stood in the sun, boots firm, spine straight, bearskin shadowing his brow. The ache in his leg was still there. It always would be, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like part of the ground beneath him, something earned. He noticed things now, noticed the difference: fewer taunts, fewer sneers, more silence, more respect. A group of veterans in blazers and medals passed by that morning. One of them, an old man with a white moustache and shaking hand, stopped and saluted him, slow, formal. Tom didn't move. He never did, but something in his chest softened. That old soldier saw him, not the uniform. Him. Later that week, a school group came by. Their teacher knelt beside them and explained, not with irony or exaggeration, but with reverence, "These guards are not just here to look smart. They represent something. They've served, some of them in places you'll read about in history books. They stand still so others don't have to. This isn't theater. It's sacrifice." Tom didn't hear all of it, but he caught enough. In the following weeks, letters began arriving at his barracks. Not thousands, not viral, just a few dozen, handwritten. From parents, from soldiers' families, from strangers. One simply read, "Thank you for being there. for standing when the rest of us rushed by. The army, too, took notice. Policies were quietly reviewed. Guards were given additional protection on post. Public campaigns reinforced the role of the household. Division not as novelty, but as active service. One morning, months after the video, Tom stood at his post when a man approached the barrier. He was around 40, slightly nervous. In his hand he held a folded note and a small bouquet. He didn't cross the line. He didn't shout. He simply placed the flowers near the base of the post and walked away. A steward collected the note later. It read to the man I laughed at last year. "I'm sorry I watched your video. I didn't understand. I do now. Thank you." Tom didn't seek glory. He didn't want fame. He wanted people to remember that stillness isn't emptiness. That silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. He stood still, and finally the world had stopped long enough to see him.